Good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. This is Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. to figure out the future of buildings. The list of panelists involved in this is on mondaylive.org. Should remind everybody that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Please do chat and post comments and questions on the chat, on the Zoom chat. And also this deck is available on mondaylive.org if you want any of the links that's on it. So this is the last Monday of August where we've been talking about, or we've been trying to understand smart building owners. So that's been the theme of this month, and it's been quite an interesting month in that regard. So the agenda today, our normal chit chat, what's going on, and then we're going to have our guest, Dominique Davison, and we're going to be talking about the sort of the sustainability and ESG from a perspective of what building owners are sort of thinking and saying. So that's the agenda for today. But before we get there, Ken, what's going on?
Thanks, Anto. Okay, well, we got our August issue is on. Which is basically preparing for AHR Expo, and we kind of have our following theme for September, which is connecting communities. And we see that this is something we all have to get involved in the near future. There's so many new communities, and we need to add some context to all of these new communities and the change. And automated buildings, we're working on our reinvention. We're getting close. We're exploring how we can collectively create, connect, contain, communicate concisely the context of our industry value. And we've been chatting about that on Monday Live quite a bit. And contexting our values has focused us on the fact that the context may be more important than the value. And separate communities are still innovating in their own fragments, but by breaking the parts and recreating them each time, we're building new montages. So we need to make progress. We're still making progress, but not painting the beautiful picture to management that we should. So I think that's something we have to work at. A couple of things I'd like to highlight is Project Haystack, which of course has been our greatest industry success story on connecting communities. Has done an amazing job, and of course they're still at it. They have several virtual events coming up here, September, October, and November. Want to check into that. If you actually click, you can get a sneak preview of one of the articles online for September, and also Haystack connecting involves with its communities. I've thrown this also the independent data layer, because this is yet another community that is just sort of rapidly evolving right now. And I've given you some links to some articles that we put that link back to LinkedIn posts. More and more, we're starting to see a lot of information on social media, LinkedIn in particular. And Automated Buildings is trying to figure out how to interface best with that. And I think we're getting close to that solution. Back to you, Anto.
Thank you, Ken. All the C's, right? Collect, create, collect. Collectively create, collect, contain, communicate, and contextualize. All the C's.
Yeah.
Like a
that's how you get to the C-suite.
Okay. I've been monitoring obviously cloud related stuff related to our industry, and this caught my eye in the last week or so. Sort of a contrast here. Google Cloud platform has decided it's going to close down the IoT core service. And basically in the same time frame, Microsoft is doing the opposite. They're actually embedding a lot more of their IoT core services into the rest of their Microsoft architecture, technology architecture. So I'm not quite sure what to make out of this. I had some thoughts, but I thought this is kind of interesting because obviously the cloud providers have some role in all of this. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on this. You're muted, Bill.
Well, I've got some thoughts on this, and they go back a few years. Some time ago, you had your early companies like Cumulosity or BTC, mostly in the industrial space, and then Siemens came out with MindSphere and all this. And the question was always for us as we were coming to market and going around the globe: are people going to rent someone else's infrastructure and choose their applications, or are they going to build their own? Now, this was a conversation we were having in 2015, 2016. To me, and I preached this for years, that people were going to build their own once they could figure out how to do it. In other words, not put their entire business risk in the hands of companies like Samsara. You guys know Samsara took $400 million in recently. The moment they did that, they shut down their whole industrial automation play. All right. So we see it all too often where companies go out and build with a great story. Organizations put their entire kind of future, digital future, in the hands of one player, and then they go out and they go out and they go out. So for me, it's not that I'm happy, but it was interesting to see that there was some prescience some years ago in that, I'm not sure if people are just going to want to send everything up to one place and then rely on them. So that's what I want to say about that, Anto.
Yeah, and that seems to be what Google has decided to do, right? That's basically their approach. Is they have an infrastructure, data infrastructure, global infrastructure. They've decided basically not to provide any services on that, but just provide the infrastructure as something of value, which we can't do independently. That's not something that any small company can do. Whereas Microsoft, I think they have the same infrastructure, but they are focusing on the application because they're sort of an enterprise focused company that they want to bring the data into their infrastructure. I don't know if that even makes sense.
No, it doesn't. It's not what I said at all. And let's move on.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so Anto, two comments. Tim Vogel just had a good comment on the chat. And then secondly, what was I going to say now? Google, from a internal perspective for all their facilities, I'm just curious as to whether we can find out, and maybe Sabine, who joins our call from time to time, and Brian Turner is close to what's going on at Google. I wonder to what degree this may impact what they're doing in that side of things, how they're managing their buildings internally.
Interesting, but anyway, just interesting trends. And with that, any other news topics?
Yeah, I got two. So first one is, I find it extremely interesting, is that we've all heard that Intel is investing in new semiconductor chip plants and so forth and so on. In Tracy's backyard, they've got 2 new ones being built. They've announced one in Ohio and so forth and so on. What I found yesterday or today, that Brookfield, the name in real estate, is investing $30 billion with a B in these chip plants. And so here you have a manufacturer such as Intel partnering with a large real estate entity. And I just thought that was the first time I've ever seen something like that. I thought it was kind of an interesting play. So with this $30 billion investment, Brookfield will own 49% of those facilities, which I thought was, again, extremely interesting. So that's number
I agree,
one.
Mark.
Yeah, and, is that the future where we've got to step up as North America, as the US, in order to, get some of this technology manufacturing back here? Is that going to be the future where it's not just a manufacturer, it's a conglomerate or a partnership of some kind, and that works. And then second thing is, I just like, because he's on this call today, I'd like to get a big shout out to Tim Vogel. We talk about, Ken, you were talking about a collaboratory and, we're all in this together. Well, Tim has got this really new and what I call neat podcast called Building Genius Podcast. And again, he's not doing this self-serving for KMC. He's doing this for the betterment of the community. And he's had some really fantastic people on there, including me, of course. But that's not it.
That was the exception, right?
That's right. That's right. And but that conversation, the fact that he's reaching out to people and doing this, and I just, again, we need more of that. So kudos, Tim Vogel. I think you've got something there. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Anto.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on. Although I'm not seeing our guest Dominique listed as attendees, although I'm told that she is on, maybe under a different name. Dominique, can you post something on the chat so I can see who you're being right now? So while that's happening, understanding smart building owners, that's been our theme. And today we're going to be talking about, hopefully we're going to be talking about sustainability and ESG and related matters. There's kind of a link between Dominique, who'll be joining us in a minute, and a past guest earlier this month, Lee Holmes. And it is actually this study that was sponsored by Lee's company, Iris Energy Analytics, and conducted by Dominique's company. Okay. So I don't have it. You unmute. Okay, so I'm not quite sure.
She coming in under Rick Justice?
Yeah, but there are two Rick Justices, and I don't know which one. So I'm gonna do one, and then if I get the real Rick Justice, we'll know.
Be nice to see Rick's face.
Yeah, no, that's Dominique's face. That's not Rick. So I think we've got the right one. Hey, Dominique, is that you?
That is me. Let's see.
You're having some tech problems with
Can
video.
you see?
There you go. That's
There we
great.
go. Okay. Everybody, so there's a lot of.
Okay, great. Thanks. So it just highlight this study, and hopefully we can have a bit of a chat about it with Dominique. So I'm going to stop my share. And Dominique, is really good to see you, and it's really good to have you on Monday Live. Could you maybe start by introducing yourself? Just give a general introduction, and then we can dig into some questions and some discussion.
Great. Thank you, Anja, so much for having me today. And thank you to Rick also for inviting me. So I am an architect. Been practicing here in the Midwest in Kansas City for the last 18 or so years. But I have both architecture and an urban design specialization. And I studied at Yale School of Architecture and UC Berkeley previous to that. So landed in the middle of the country after bouncing around, and then decided to start this firm that's really focused on sustainability. and found very quickly that the audiences here in the Midwest were a little different in terms of their decision making in California, and that they really wanted to understand the cost benefit of what they were endeavoring to build. And so quickly started getting a lot of questions about, how much does this lead point cost, and what's the lowest way that we can get to lead gold, or et cetera. So many of the earlier conversations were sort of motivated by lead, and more over the past decade or so, I'd say, now we're really seeing much more of a conversation around carbon neutrality, and how do we map a path to carbon neutrality for our buildings. So all of these, experiences working with clients as an architect that specializes in sustainability cause us to try to have a more hard-nosed scientific way of answering their questions, and that led us to developing software, which we started way back in 2013, and then we finally turned it into a company in 2017, and have been developing it since then, both in partnership with the National Science Foundation Center for Big Learning and a variety of different specialists all around the country. And have what we have today, which is a full-blown platform that combines cost analytics with weather data and building enclosure information to be able to, in seconds, give people an insight into various options for how they can best achieve energy efficiency and water efficiency. And then also stormwater mitigation. So how do we minimize the impact of stormwater on the site? So we're integrated with Revit, but you can also just do a manual update. And we've been talking to Rick and his team for many years on how to kind of tie what we do in terms of the predictive analytics of how a building may perform and how its operational budget, right, balances with the costs to incrementally improve the quality of a building, right, and design it well with real-time data and IoT. So Rick immediately saw that we could be a digital twin in terms of operational building usage. And we've done a couple of pilot projects. One was the fire station for Kansas City, Missouri. One is the building I'm in currently. And then we worked on a series of school buildings now for Holmes County in the state of Mississippi, where we just completed a study for 10 existing school buildings to give them what is sort of a good, better, best approach to how they can lower their operating expenses and then ultimately hopefully get to a net zero output. So I can share my screen if I don't know if we want to kind of walk through that.
Well, I have the report up that we can speak to, but just to set the scene, you're an architect. That's your profession.
Correct.
Right? And
not of technology, of
not a technology entrepreneur, but in the process of your architectural firm talking to owners, you realized there was a need to provide data in this manner. So you created the Planet Impact solution, which is data-driven information for buildings.
Yes, that is the summary. Yeah, because I was shocked how dumb buildings are, I mean, they're not very intelligent. And so our goal is to, and as all of you are interested in, how do we bring true intelligence, right, to building information modeling?
So let's spend a few minutes just on this report. I'll bring it up and I can just sort of scan through it. If you can just sort of speak to what this is all about. This is and I've provided a link to this report on the deck, so everybody can get this PDF. But basically, I'm just going to slowly scroll through this one example, which is just one of the schools, and maybe you can speak to what we're seeing.
Yeah, so this is you know, probably a close to 60 plus year old school, or sorry, not quite that much. It's more like 50, but this is one of the better schools actually that we encountered in but one of the major things that we did is you know, walk through the spaces and really kind of understand the lighting conditions, what's the basic building type, right? Because we're trying to link building performance data with actual building, you know, physical aspect of the building. So we were looking at window to wall area ratios and programming and trying to really kind of dissect and understand what was happening, where were the big problems. At the very beginning of this report, the first couple pages, I don't know if you want to jump back to those. I think it is important to kind of talk about how we approach this with the school district and why all of this is important, right? We have, yeah, that page is perfect. Thank you, Anto. So instead of just saying, well, we want to lower your energy bills and your water bills, we talked about how a school that's properly designed and operated can have a positive outcome for these schools in terms of you know, improved skills, reported positive changes, you know, behavioral improvements, reduced absenteeism, all these things that we thought that the school board and or you know, the client essentially would be interested in. So we thought about all of this in terms of wellness. You know, having better air, how do we achieve that? How do we help people to be able to concentrate better? How do we give them, you know, a better attitude, promote fitness, those kinds of things. So we really couched everything in terms of what we thought would motivate them. And then we really looked at how each of these aspects could then be addressed through the built environment. So making a very clear connection for them, such as, you know, maximizing the natural light or even the colors and textures of the walls. So we thought about it very holistically as architects, instead of just wanting to necessarily, you know, solve their HVAC problem. So anyway, I just thought that would be important to bring in. And a lot of this is very universal to schools. So it was easily replicated across an entire body of buildings. Then the way that we approach projects at our architecture firm, which is Draw Architecture and Urban Design, is this sustainability workflow model. And we have, in parallel with this, if the project is a smart building workflow that plugs in all of these kind of green dots along the way. If we know that the building is one that could potentially benefit from IoT, right? Kind of understanding early on what are the needs of the client, right? Like how many points of data do they actually need? What are the kinds of controls that they want to have visibility to? Who's going to be viewing this data and managing it long term, right? So that we're kind of really working that in to the process, and it's not something that just gets kind of glommed on at the very end, and we're scrambling to get a spec section together for it. Thank you all very much, by the way, for your spec work in that regard. So our goal was, first and foremost, how to achieve energy efficiency for them. But then, you know, how do we think about that in terms of a good, better, best approach? So 25% efficiency is good, right? Over 50 is better. And then net zero would be a real success. So right here, this is an important slide. Actually, if you can go back onto this slide right here. We did an analysis of what their total current energy costs were. And that was not as easy as it should have been, because we weren't able to access some of the, or pretty much any of the utility data. So we had to have a third party from Pacific Labs kind of build a model of what the estimated energy usage of these buildings was. And that was a very helpful way to then create a baseline, which of course is very important in this kind of a process. And then we looked at, in terms of the overall analysis of the improvements, what would those total up to? Those 1.4 million, roughly, this is all estimated, and then 4 million in PV investment. So the total project cost was, just under 7 million, with a payback of about 8.2. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Total project cost was about 5.4 million, but over 15 years, the payback savings to the school district should be just under 7 million. So that's pretty, positive. All right, next. So this is just kind of looking again at the process, right? It's doing a sustainability analysis. So we dive into all the energy efficiency approaches that we can take, whether it's the systems, lighting, renewable energy, water efficiency, what are the best practices that we can do there, and how do those all kind of tie into their goals, which in this case were wellness. And then furthermore, commissioning, right? Having that enhanced monitor-based smart building at the back end in order to make sure that they're actually achieving those savings and getting the benefits from them. So this is just, helping them understand the steps that we took in this analysis. And it's a 155-page study. So I understand why Atta is trying to move through it pretty quickly. And please feel free to kind of jump in anytime. So localized climate is always really important. So we look at that for each of our projects, trying to make sure that we're utilizing the appropriate strategy for the specific climate, this particular location. For example, dehumidification is one of the key components to making sure that we're creating the comfort they needed. Okay.
And then you go into each school and did a report on each one. That's kind of right. So there's 10 of these area specific reports and models that we built out in terms of, helping them to understand the relationships of the facility, where we saw deficiencies or opportunities for improvement. So you can see how the imagery, ties in with the overall floor plan and specific areas that, things that we were talking about with those pictures, right? The hallway lights are all different colors and they're all there were T12s, blinds that reduce the amount of lighting that could be in the space, et cetera. That's more of that.
Yeah. So then this is the report that came from the Planet Impact Analysis, showing what the baseline carbon footprint is in terms of 1.2 million pounds of operational CO2, and then the water usage baseline, which is pretty massive, 444,000 gallons of water, and then the projected efficiency potential. So this is the kind of 23% efficiency based on just upgrading systems and using energy recovery, and the projected potential savings and payback for that. They needed to upgrade their, so it's going from a just sort of typical code minimum HVAC to, slightly better. And
It's the same.
yeah, so then this is sort of the better option. Attainable efficiency projections. And this starts to look at not just upgrading systems, but now how are we also improving the enclosure of the building as well. So, replacing windows where they were just single pane windows and were really underperforming, better lighting. And some of these, had less of an immediate payback, but they have more impacts in terms of health and wellness. The window area actually was very low, and in some of these buildings it's extremely low. Some of them had like a 4% window to wall area ratio, and it was like, almost no natural light at all. So in a lot of these schools, we introduced a larger window area to get to better, like a 25% window to wall area ratio minimum. And then these are the explanations of what those numbers mean, what we're doing to achieve the outcome. And then finally, the net zero projection is, once we've done everything we can to make the building as efficient as it can be on the system side, plus using, smart building monitoring, plus making improvements to the building enclosure, then how much would we need to add in terms of renewables to kind of close the gap to that net zero outcome. So here's the kind of the summary of the good, better, best projections in terms of the three options and projected paybacks. And then same for water. So we did another approach to looking at how do we, change water flows. If we went to a 1 gallon versus a 2.2, how many gallons of water are saved, et cetera. So it's just really a helpful guide to allow building owners to understand where to invest and how to invest, and give them a path forward.
Can you speak a little bit to the motivation behind this report? I'm going to take it off so that we can just talk directly. And the motivation and why was it down, and then what's going to happen to it, because it's obviously a static report.
Mm-hmm.
And how you intend to make it a living document, if that is the intent, or a living set of results.
Well, Rick, I don't know if you want to talk to that a little bit, but our hope is to kind of link the data from this report to a dashboard. Is Tristan on the call? No. Okay. A dashboard of, the actual building data, so that then they can start to see that comparative of, if you're supposed to be, if you're trying to get on track to, the net zero goal, here's where you are in reality in comparison, right? Are you on track or not? If you decide as a school board that you're just trying to hit that 25% reduction, right? Then where are you in relation to that? So it's just helping to link the expected outcome with the actual.
Right. Wonderful. Any of the panelists have a question or thought they want to share?
So this is Mark Peacock. I got a couple questions for you. Thank you for joining us today, by the way. So when you're having discussion, let's just lump everybody together with an end user. All right, could be a school, whatever. What's your take on the owner's knowledge base when it comes to building data? Do they get it? Do they even know what it is? Do they know where the data comes from, where it resides? Just in general, your thoughts, your feelings around the understanding of the building owners and their true knowledge base as an industry. We talk about all this. We have the technology, we've got the outcomes, but I think one of the challenges we continually face is the owner doesn't always get it, or they only get part of it. So your take, please.
So, and it depends on which, what building type of owner you're talking to as well. So, gosh, I would put the number of people that really understand how their buildings are working at a very low percentage. And we do get some resistance from facilities managers, even who do know how their buildings are working, but they don't notice that one of their major systems hasn't been commissioned properly in 5 years and is causing a massive leak in their overall system. So I think it definitely has been a journey of education, and I think that's why when we're getting a really positive response when we show people this report, because what we're trying to tie together the why you should care about this, and here are the ways that you can take steps, right? Because I think people hear data and a lot of times they don't know what it means and they don't know how to take action in response to that data. And so I think that's the narrative we're trying to really piece together here, is how this is going to benefit you, not just in terms of dollars, but a happier school population.
So owners that do understand the value of data for their operations, how would you characterize their sort of conversations with you as being different to those that don't? Is it a completely different conversation?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that get it are like, yeah, we do want the dashboard, we want insight into it, and it's a pretty easy sell, and there's some people who are theoretically very interested in it, right? But then ultimately, are they the person who's going to be managing it? So there's always several people that have to be convinced along the way: the facilities person, the owner, and then the engineering team, right? And that's a bit of a steep climb, and why we developed that kind of the smart building workflow, to make sure we're having those conversations all along and everybody understands why we're doing it and what we're doing, and can kind of get on board even if they're not on board from the start.
Okay. By the way, Hiri asked a question about the report. It is linked on the slide deck, which is viewable if you go to mondaylive.org. So, and I'll try and get it and post it on chat as well. But any other questions?
Yes. So Dominic, hi, this is Steve Fay. Really appreciate you sharing your experience with us. It's an impressive report. I just want to get a little bit of clarity. You showed I think you referred to it as a profit, or $7 million to the positive if they did everything. So do I interpret that as if they do the install, my assumption is you're putting solar at each of the sites, right? And so at that point, if they made the investment in the solar, then there's sufficient, they need, other than an emergency situation, they're not pulling on local utilities at all for any of their electricity.
Well, it comes in waves, right? So we're assuming like a net metered situation,
Okay,
where if there is plenty of sun, then they don't need to pull any, or they're maybe even producing additional and kind of passing it back to the grid. But there might be other times where they're there's not enough sun, and so they are pulling from the grid. So that's
Right.
generally,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And there's always the fees, right? Like the monthly fees the utility will pay you. I mean, will charge you anyway. So like on our building here, we cover roughly 40 to 50% of our energy usage with the solar on our building. But even those months where we are producing more than we're using, they still get their utility charge.
Right. Okay. So, but the key point here is that because of the investment in solar, they have the opportunity to dramatically reduce their current utility bills, and that additional cost offset helps to pay for the water. They still have to pay for water, right?
Right.
But because of the investments you're making in water usage, using less water, their water bill is going to go down, but they still have to pay for the water they are going to use.
Exactly. Right.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to make sure I understood all of that, because I think schools, just from the physical structure and their typical footprint, do seem to allow for solar, whereas a lot of downtown city urban centers will have greater challenges, I would think, in that regard.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was part of the climate analysis that we did is, for this location, for this climate and the physical characteristics, what are the kind of ideal approaches in terms of getting to net zero?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Just as a follow-on to Mark Peacock's question about how many owners are attuned to this, how many architects are attuned to this subject matter?
Probably as many as there are owners. So not a whole lot. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been going to smart building conferences and US Ignite conferences and all of that, I'm generally the only architect in the room.
Right.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
It's a little bit more of a mechanical engineer's kind of mindset, I think. But I haven't even seen that many mechanical engineers either. So I don't know if it's because it's not being taught in school, which would be very interesting to look at. I don't know if there's like a curriculum that could be developed, or if there is one already around this. And I think we're kind of taught, and I might be completely wrong about this, but that the building envelope is more important than how it's operated or what the systems are. And in what all the data I've seen, how the building's operated and the efficiency and of the systems is at least as important as the building envelope, if not more. So
could it be that there are no financial levers for architects or engineers to care about this, in terms of the 100-year-old process by which we construct buildings through the CSI and other ways, that there's actually no financial coupling between these outcomes and the trades that architects and engineers practice? Is that a potential problem?
I think I think it's why we struggled so much in selling our software, right? Because they don't benefit from designing a more financially resourceful building than they do a typical building or the more beautiful, whatever, yes, there's no coupling there. There are a couple of new pieces of the Inflation Reduction Act that we're still trying to wrap our heads around that help to achieve higher levels of sustainability in buildings. And I'm not sure yet how much smart building technology kind of ties into that. But we're digging into it, trying to understand. We do know that it's about double what it was before in terms of the benefit. So for multifamily, for example, if you have a 50% or more efficient building that's net zero ready, it's a $5,000 per unit this. So that's for some of the projects that we're working on. We do a lot of larger multifamily. We're trying to talk to our owners and say, hey, this is a massive benefit. This could be $1 million, $2 million for you if you go after this incentive. But to your point, I think there is, okay, so one kind of highlight is that some of the like COAT and the design award requirements from AIA, which is the American Institute of Architects, are starting to require that you have 1 year of building operating data before you can report. Like Living Building Challenge does this as well. So there is more of an emphasis on the long-term building operational efficiency, post-occupancy in the design community. It's definitely been slow to catch on, and I think it's one, because designers don't think about integrating this technology early on in their design process, but two, just a lack of knowledge about it, right? Just a kind of general.
Right.
Dominique,
Thank you.
who's, given your kind of point of view of the world, who would you say should own some of this task of making buildings more efficient? Is it all throughout the design chain, so to speak, or is there one throat to choke in all of this?
I mean, ultimately, what I've come to understand about the building and construction industry over the last 25 plus years is that if it's not required by code, it's not going to be widely adopted. So as much as we try to put carrots out there and get people to, try to do the right thing, LEED really took off because all federal buildings were required to be LEED, and then, various municipalities kind of followed suit.
So that's kind of step one, right?
Yeah.
Get it required. And then once it's required, do you believe it should be the architect's role to get more involved and specify that, or as a consulting engineer, all the way down to mechanical contractor, or what do you think?
I think right. I think it's very much the mechanical engineer, along with the architect should have some knowledge of this. We have to have some knowledge of all the different pieces, right? So, and if you're leading a team, definitely the architect needs to know it, but the engineer, it's a Rick can attest to this. It's an uphill battle trying to get the mechanical engineer to specify a smart building system if they've never done it before.
So, Dominique, Mark again, a quick question. So during our Monday Live conversation today and previous conversations, we've talked a lot about smart buildings. All right. And what you were talking about originally today was energy and water, which is obviously part of a smart building. All right. Now, do you believe that the conversation is more accepted when you're talking to these people, when you just talk about energy and or water and not bring in the larger smart buildings where something that I believe is once you start talking about the grandiose smart building, that you get less and less people who really understand that and know the value and the benefits. And shame on us, we in the industry need to take blame for that, but which we are, and we're trying to do stuff about it. But keeping that conversation to energy and or water, is that a quicker path to get them to get on board or not?
It depends on the client. So, I mean, certain clients I know are much more security driven, right? And they want the smart building for the security reasons. There's others who want it because they want to provide an amenity for their tenants so they can get their groceries delivered, right? There's others that want it for the pure luxury and be say they, you know, their building's fully automated. So it really, there's many motivators. I think we tend to focus on the energy and the water piece of it because it just feels like, well, one, it's what we focus on and what we specialize in. And it resonates, I think, on the public side very, very heavily.
Can you speak to how ESG plugs into all of this?
Right. Yes, exactly. We keep hearing, right, that boards across the country are requiring their companies to have carbon reduction goals or net carbon zero goals. And we're hearing also that that's kind of, you know, trickling down to on the portfolio side for REITs and for you know, on the commercial side of things. So I wouldn't say that that's been what we have seen so much, but we do hear a lot about it. I think locally here in Kansas City, we just passed an ordinance to get climate neutral by 2040. So it's definitely a place where everyone's talking about, okay, now how do we do that, and how do we, you know, invest in our built environment in order to reach that goal. I think everyone wants to do it, but unless you have a very high-powered, you know, data team like Google, who supposedly figured this out in 2007, but I'd love to see exactly how. You know, everyone's sort of scrambling to figure it out. So if we can provide an answer, right, here's a path, and it doesn't require you to sign on to $1 million, you know, solution that only one company can provide.
So do you have any thoughts about how we can improve the sort of the traction of these issues? And obviously you have here as a panelist technologists that focus on data, and the audience as well, and viewers. What should we do to push things forward or enable things to go faster? Or your thoughts?
I do think the narrative is very strong of, if we can show examples of how smart buildings are operating compared to, you know, a non-smart building, and what the impacts are in terms of carbon. Having case studies like that is very powerful, and that can be then shared, you know, widely through a major marketing effort, and talk to leaders about that. I think that could be very potent, because I mean, if there's a way to thread the needle with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's funds, you know, there's money for it.
Great. Last thoughts from the panelists?
I just, one kind of observation maybe is I'm sensing equal frustration from Dominique and some of the areas that we've all had in our areas, by the sounds of it. So, which is sad, because collectively as an industry, it seems like we're all on the same page on what needs to happen, or what the right outcome is, but we can't seem to get things moving in that direction. Right? It's lacking a couple of key incentives or structure, or I'm not sure what to call it exactly to make it all happen, which we can't get our finger on, I don't think, to really make that happen. So.
And one of the premise of this month's conversation on Monday Live here is that there are people that understand this and get the value of data. And we're trying to understand that so that we can grow that or make that be much more resonant to the conversation.
Yeah.
I do feel like it's picking up. We're hearing a lot more requests, right? For a smart building. We had one tech company that wanted to develop the smartest building in the US, right?
Was that actual words from them? We want the smartest building?
Yeah.
Did they know what they were asking?
They did know. Yeah. I think what was the project in England? The Edge, right? They wanted to basically recreate what they did at the Edge. So we're, that's interesting. But I think just the kind of pragmatic application of it, like how does this make everything easier, right? How can it just be on your iPhone?
Or Android?
Or Android.
So we're coming up to the top of the hour. Does anybody want to sort of do a wrap of what we learned so far? Who hasn't spoken much?
Well,
Ken?
I wouldn't not necessarily want to do a wrap, but the whole carbon, these carbon goals are starting to be set. And so I think we have to start putting our planning in place. And you talked around carbon, but you didn't kind of, I didn't talk about carbon auditing or any of those features. So maybe just do a quick, what's your feeling on that? Is that something that's got to be part of your toolkit in the future moving ahead?
Well, we do include in our platform, what's your operational carbon? So that's the output of this report was how do you get to net zero carbon in terms of energy? And it's not, around all the materials, but I mean, if there was a more motivation politically behind a carbon tax, that would certainly get everything moving very, very quickly in that direction and doing carbon accounting. But at the corporate level, though, people are doing that and tracking it. But that's not, we don't do the all-inclusive kind of carbon accounting necessarily. We do look at operational carbon and then embodied carbon in terms of what we do. So that's using another platform called Tally, where we'll look at, the materials that are in a building. But that's confusing. That's a different piece of software that we use on the architecture side, not Planet Impact.
Yeah, also World Strife is starting to get involved in that now too, and we may be actually going backwards instead of forward. And the other observation there is that geographically, some folks have the option to get carbon free a lot quicker than others, just because of how far you are from the coal plant and or how close you are to the waterfall.
Absolutely, and what's your climate like, right?
Very good point. Yeah.
So I've got one more comment. It's not a wrap up. It's more of a question for Dominique. So Dominique, a lot of the emphasis we have in our discussions is around data. And because we all fundamentally understand the importance and the value of it. But the challenge, of course, is whether the owners understand it, let alone the architects and engineers. My question for you has to do more with the how data can be presented, the experience of data, and whether or not 3D visualization, VR headsets, and things of that sort could make a significant difference in building owners and operators appreciating what this data might do for them.
Yeah, I think having 3D visualizations absolutely helps people to get it. Just boiling it down to the kind of the bullet pointed highlights is also key, right? Giving them the backup information if they need it, but just trying to just everybody, you know, has like a 20-second attention span, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
how do you
right.
fit everything that we do into like a Twitter feed?
Exactly.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we need to wrap this. It's been great to have you on the show here, Dominique. Thank you very much, and thanks for the panelists and the attendees. And we'll have a recording of this on YouTube sometime tomorrow, and we'll see you again next week. So otherwise, have a great week, everybody. Thank you, Dominique.
Later.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Dominique.
Thank you, Dominique.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye bye.